Tune in for a tale, words that set sail.
Digital Splendor, Literature Illuminated.
All right, today we are diving into a really foundational piece of writing, something that's had a huge impact on how we think about freedom. It's John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. And trust me, this isn't some dusty old book for a philosophy class. It's basically a guide to a question we all bump into, well, pretty much every single day. Right there, that's the big question. Where is that line? Mill jumps right into this, and he argues that the boundary between your personal liberty and society's authority isn't some fixed line in the sand. Nope, it's something we have to constantly figure out and defend. Why? Because the real threats to our freedom, well, they aren't always what you'd expect. So let's start with the one Mill was really worried about. You see, to really get Mill's solution, you first have to understand the problem he was seeing. And it wasn't the kind of tyranny you see in history books, kings and dictators. He was worried about something way more subtle, something that gets under your skin. He said that in a modern democracy, the biggest danger isn't always the government. Sometimes the bigger threat is what he famously called the tyranny of the majority. Think about it. It's that massive, unspoken pressure to just conform, to think, say, and do what everyone else is doing. And this kind of social pressure, Mill argued, can be even worse than political oppression. I mean, you can fight a bad law, right? But how do you fight a prevailing opinion? It follows you everywhere. In his words, it penetrates much more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself. There's just less room to escape. So, what do we do about it? How do you possibly protect yourself from this tyranny of popular opinion? Well, Mill came up with a single, incredibly clear principle. One simple rule to draw that line between you and the rest of the world. And here it is. He called it the harm principle. This is the absolute heart of the entire book. What it means is that society, whether it's the government or your neighbors, can only interfere with your freedom for one single reason: to stop you from harming somebody else. That's it. And this is the part that was and still is so radical. Society can't step in just because it thinks your choices are bad for you. They can't stop you from doing something just because they think it's foolish or immoral or just not in your own best interest. Your own good, your own happiness, that's your department, not theirs. Okay, so starting with that one big principle, Mill then breaks it down into three specific, non-negotiable freedoms that he says are absolutely essential for any society that wants to call itself free. And these three are the whole shebang. They're the bedrock of true liberty for Mill. First, the freedom to think whatever you want. Second, the freedom to live your life how you want to. And third, the freedom to team up with other people who want the same things. As long as you're not hurting anyone, these freedoms are absolute. But Mill saves his biggest and most powerful arguments for that very first liberty, the freedom of thought, and just as important, the freedom to express those thoughts. He knew this was going to be the toughest sell, and man, does he build a case for it. I mean, this is the real test, isn't it? It's the question everyone asks. Surely there are some ideas out there that are just so wrong or so dangerous that we have to shut them down. But Mill's answer to this is a clear, powerful, and very well-reasoned no. And this is just brilliant. He argues that we actually benefit from hearing opinions we disagree with, no matter what. Think about it. If the person who disagrees with you is right, well, silencing them robs you of the chance to learn the truth. And if they're wrong, well, silencing them robs you of the chance to sharpen your own beliefs. Arguing against error forces you to really understand why you believe what you believe. It turns a dead dogma into a living truth. It's a win-win. And Mill brings receipts from history to prove his point. He says, look at some of the best and wisest people in history. People like Socrates, or even the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. These were good people who were part of silencing ideas that we now consider essential truths. So his question to us is, what makes us so sure we're not making the same exact mistakes today? This quote just nails it, doesn't it? For Mill, silencing even one single dissenting voice is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because it means you're assuming you are infallible. You're claiming to be 100% certain that you are right and they are wrong. And that, for any human being, is a claim we can just never, ever truly make. So all of this leads to the big question for us, right here, right now. This was all written nearly 170 years ago. Why should we still care? Well, because Mill's warning about the tyranny of the prevailing opinion, it honestly feels like it was written for the internet age. That intense pressure to conform, the way an online mob can form in seconds, the social media bubbles that feed us what we already believe and punish dissent. This is exactly the kind of social tyranny he was afraid of, just supercharged on a global scale. And that leaves us with the urgent question that Mill puts right in our lap. He forces us to stop and think. Maybe the biggest harm doesn't come from the wrong idea itself. Maybe the real harm comes from the act of silencing it. Because every time we shut down a debate, we don't just lose a chance to find the truth. We actually make ourselves weaker. We lose our ability to think critically, and we risk, little by little, losing the ability to think for ourselves at all.